Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 16 of Moriarty the Patriot, The Phantom of Whitechapel Part 2, and I really liked Part 1. Oh my gosh, seeing Bond, James Bond, now joining the ranks of Moriarty's crew, I like it a lot. I liked the last episode because Moran got to bond, literally, with Bond, and then we got to see them kind of working as a unit and showing kind of how the Moriarty crew does things. That they're not really yes men to Moriarty, whether it be Albert, Louis, or Lewis, or William. They kind of all have their own roles to play, but they all have their own independence in how they do the things that need to be done in order to make the mission go well. So I do like that. I like that we saw the dynamic of the Moriarty crew. We got to see them go undercover and solve a case with the robbery and everything, get the stuff. And then we also got introduced to Jack, who is not Jack the Ripper. His reputation as Jack the Ripper from the Afghan War is being ripped off, literally, by someone else. And the way that William describes it in the last episode, it seems like it is a group of people rather than just an individual doing these murders. Like it's a group that's doing it. And so while Scotland Yard is trying to do the lawful good thing and try to figure out the actual identity of Jack the Ripper, the civilians in that area are not having any of it, and so William and the Moriarty crew are going to try to investigate themselves because they have a personal interest in this case. They have a personal vestige in it with Jack Renfield being involved. So their old mentor, his name being dragged through the mud, so to speak, they clearly want to find out who this is and why they're using Jack's name. So I'm very curious. I'm very curious if Sherlock's going to get involved in all this, because he very well could be. If Scotland Yard's not getting anywhere in the investigation, I could see Lestrade, who did not look like he was agreeing with the old captain in the last episode. I can see Lestrade kind of going rogue and getting Sherlock involved. Maybe Lestrade's a lawful good character, but I could see him being like, well, I'm going to bring in Sherlock because he would be helpful, and it's not really going against the rules bringing him in. So, he could find a little loophole there, right? But I'm very curious to see what all we end up doing in this episode. I'm not sure if we're going to end in this episode, if it's going to carry over to an Act 3 or not, but I'm curious to know who's behind it, because usually at this point when we start a case like this, the person who's usually the bad guy gets revealed early on, right? We saw that back with the dancer on the bridge. You found out within 5 minutes it was the professor. And so in this case, though, we really don't know who it is. I mean, unless it is actually Jack, but they make it to where it seems like it's not. So it's curious that they're not giving us any hints so far. It's very mysterious, and I like that for this show, that they're going all in on it. But yeah, I'm curious to see what ends up happening and who our murderer actually is, and if Sherlock gets involved, or if they're just gonna let Moriarty and crew. I could see them just letting Moriarty and crew solve this case because it's a chance for Bond to actually get some action in the group and not have to rely on Sherlock. I could see them doing it that way, but I don't know. I'm curious. So let's find out, shall we? We are going to start Moriarty the Patriot Season 1, Episode 16, or technically Episode 5 of Season 2. And we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Okay, so, this is a really good episode too. This is really good. I honestly like the second core a lot. Oh, so we've got the Patterson guy is now suspicious. I thought he was Moriarty's informant, and he may be. He may be Moriarty's informant on the inside, and we just don't know enough about him yet. Indeed. Okay. All right. So the case is pretty much wrapped up in a two-parter here, which is interesting. But yeah, fascinating. All right, so what I like about this episode is that it's so funny. It's starting to blur the lines, right? It's starting to blur the lines here and making things more complicated, which I like. I like stories that do that. So on the one hand, the way that it frames Moriarty and the Lords of Crime in this is it makes them into, like Robin Hood people, like freedom fighters, It makes Moran and Bond look great together. I love their little tap, their elbow tap and everything. I love it. And that they're getting along. It's like, oh, look, they saved the day. But in reality, they killed a bunch of people. So it's like, but yeah, there is some it gets complicated in this episode just a wee bit. And so what I like about this, and you can right off the bat, it gets complicated because when Lestrade does the theater show for Sherlock, I thought it was Moriarty narrating and telling the story, even though that wasn't Moriarty's voice actor. It sounded like Moriarty narrating, and then it was Lestrade telling Sherlock. So there's already that kind of like gray area there of both sides using the same means, and Sherlock not wanting to take part in the case. I feel like Sherlock's more cautious now. One, because he's seen that his actions can directly impact other people, getting them involved. So it seems like Sherlock, from having Irene involved in the last couple cases and seeing her die, he doesn't want to get involved as much because he's afraid of what it'll do for Watson, perhaps, and Lestrade and others. So you can tell Sherlock's still kind of in that grieving state in this episode. He's like not wanting to get involved. And then we'll talk about the inopportune truth at the end there. But holy cow. So yeah. Old man Jack, he can move. I was like, dude, you're an agile older man, for the record, and got way more hair than that ponytail that's on. But it's interesting, right? And the OP's adding shots now. I'm like, oh, this is an OP that's evolving. Okay, nice. But yeah, I love the symbolism of the red light and the wind billowing through William's hair as he talks about that. Yeah, it makes sense. This is a crime, an organized crime unit, but it's ran by one person, this Milverton man. I'm not going to research him because I want to be surprised. So don't spoil me on him. I want to be surprised for Milverton. That's interesting, though. Okay. But yes, they figure out it's an organized crime. And yeah, the old man in the warehouse tries to argue with Moriarty. He's like, well, we're both trying to start a revolution, so aren't we doing the same thing? And it's like, no. I'm glad they bring it up in this episode. Technically, Moriarty's revolution is to have the weaker people gain power and to dethrone the powerful. And what that guy's trying to do is exactly the opposite. They're trying to start a revolution, but they're only trying to gain, more power for the ones that are on top. It's not trying to help those that are lower in status. So it is different. Yeah, as soon as that guy said that, I was like, nah, their ideals are not matching up at all. But yeah, I like their plan. The herder guy is interesting. I like him getting involved in this. I don't know if Herder is blind or if he just has the blindfold to keep his identity a secret. It's like a mask. That's interesting. But yeah, so I like that their whole thing is we need to diffuse the situation. We don't need to start a revolution this soon. One, because that would be out of their control. Here's the thing with Milverton. And I'm wondering if Patterson is working with Milverton. And I wonder if they are intentionally trying to start a riot, right? Because here's the thing at the end of the day with Moriarty. Moriarty has all been about this revolution and changing society, but on their terms. The way that they do it is fully within their control. And that's why they were so keen on expressing to Mycroft, they're like, no, we've got full control of this. We know what we're doing. It's fine. And then Mycroft's like, okay, as long as it doesn't get out of control, I'm not going to step in. But the minute that I see that you guys can't handle this and it's going to lead to a revolution, then we're going to step in and stop this whole shebang. So my theory is that Milverton, him and Patterson are working together and they are trying to get this out of hand. They are trying to start a revolution because that's how they're going to get rid of Moriarty. Is to get rid of the Lord of Crime, they're going to start a revolution and that's going to get Mycroft involved. Which would mean, because I feel like Patterson is a double agent, because if he knows Moriarty's position and he's on the inside with the government in Scotland Yard, then he's able to kind of work the inner workings of that system, right? I just feel like Milverton's involvement is... I thought at the start of the series that Sherlock being involved was going to throw a wedge into things, but that's not the case. It's Milverton getting involved that's throwing a wedge in it. Sherlock actually is being quite surprising in this, oddly enough. But yeah, so that it's all a grand theater, right? Moriarty, it's funny because Moriarty's whole thesis is kind of exercised in this episode, right? The idea of the theater and playing the people. So Scotland Yard and the vigilantes are forced to work together to go after the one enemy, the common enemy, which is Jack the Ripper in this case. And then through the means of theater, Jack the Ripper and Jack and Fred and them all get out and they manage to, to escape, but to unite the people together under a common cause, right? So it's kind of just this entire scene that plays out is just William Moriarty's entire thesis being represented on screen. And that whole thing with the quarter, with the coin and Bond kicking it, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Between that moment and the Jack Rentfield like using the knife and jumping over the entire crowd of people, there's a little suspense of disbelief there that's a little cartoonish, but I'm like, I'm willing to say okay with it. Sure. It's an anime. I'm going with it. It's fine. It was cool as hell, so why not? And it's the establishment of Bond and Moran working together and the idea that Jack's not quite too old yet, right? So I'm fine with it. That's all fine and dandy. But yeah, so, oh my gosh. But yeah, going back to them in the warehouse, the use of a Gatling gun by Atherton. Atherton bringing out the Gatling gun. I was like, aha! That's establishing that it's good to know that there are parts of the plan they couldn't predict, right? That the Gatling gun was something they could not predict or foresee happening, so they had to think on the fly to solve the problem. Good to know. And all the techniques like Fred with the light, using the different signals, things like that. Really cool. But going to the warehouse. So yeah, the theatrical act is to show the population, like to lead them on a certain way. And then behind the scenes, the Moriarty brothers being the devils in the room, like the red eyes glowing, and Lewis showing that, yeah, several of you were commenting on Patreon and YouTube that Lewis is the fighter of the group. And I was like, really? Quiet Lewis? Quiet Lewis, like straight up like slitting throats, you know? I was so surprised by that. But yeah, Moriarty and Lewis, they kill those guys. They kill all 8 of them. And south the explode. I mean, 3 of them they inadvertently killed through the bomb, but they like straight up, you know, shanked 5 of them and killed them. And then that leads to them leaving the bodies, the decision to leave the bodies, and what Moriarty wants to do in that moment. Saying that Holmes, that the Yard, and I've gotten back to this part, that Yard will arrive shortly with Holmes. Holmes is starting to figure out the full story behind the case. Right. So William wants to know what his reaction is going to be. Like, is he going to adopt the inconvenient truth? Right? And figure out that this was all Moriarty's involvement and that there was a third party influence. Is he going to tell the truth? Or is he going to adopt the more convenient lie? And he kind of doesn't do either. Sort of. The way he phrases it is kind of a mix of both, right? Right? Is he going to do the inconvenient truth or the more convenient lie? Like, which is he going to go with? Is he going to reveal Moriarty's involvement and just muck up the situation more? Or is he going to create a lie so that he protects Moriarty's identity? And then, yeah, so this guy, he doesn't have dark hair. He has white hair and these, like, brilliant greenish yellow eyes. And he knows who Moriarty is. William James Moriarty, if I recall. A young mathematics prodigy. The man who I'm competing with. Oh my gosh. Yep. I must thoroughly investigate him at once and add him to the list. So interesting. I'm curious about this list. The list kept by Charles Augustus Milverton. Okay. And Patterson has glasses too, so I'm curious. I don't think Patterson and Milverton are the same person, right? Unless it's a wig that Milverton's wearing there, but I don't think so, because I thought Patterson's eyes were just blue. They're green. His eyes are green, but not that vibrant, not that lime green that this guy's is. And so then, yeah, we go back to Watson, Lestrade, and Sherlock investigating the bodies at the explosion and the work of a pro, right? And so then they ask Sherlock what his opinions are. And I like that Sherlock's so standoffish these last couple episodes. It's as if Sherlock is mulling over his involvement. Like, how much do I get involved? What do I do about Moriarty? What's going on? Like, you can tell maybe he's regretting burning the paper to reveal the name. Like, there's a lot going on in his brain in the Mind Palace to the point where he's, like, just sitting there with the cigarette and it's just, like, been smoldering. And he's like, oh, yeah. These are likely victims of Jack the Ripper, too. After stabbing them all to death, he used explosions as a decoy to get away. And they both seem surprised. They're like, well, yeah, we figured that out. We'll just cordon off the area and go after Jack the Ripper. Seems legit. Thanks, Holmes. We figured that out, too. Funny that it's that clear cut. But then Holmes is so angry. Honestly, there is such a thing as an inopportune truth. So yeah, so the inopportune truth, it's the combination of the inconvenient truth and the convenient lie, right? Because it's like, the truth of the matter is that, yeah, technically it was kind of Jack the Ripper, but it was the persona that Moriarty and them had adopted for the moment, and they did use the explosion to make a getaway. So he's not wrong, but it's not the full story, right? It's just inopportune, because the inopportune part of it is that they can't talk about the full scope of things now because of the situation and because of how delicate everything is, whilst keeping at bay the worst case scenario of a conflict. Yeah, that's the inopportune truth. He's like, what they did was they prevented the worst case scenario from happening they prevented an even worse murder through a murder, right? They prevented the Scotland Yard getting massacred or civilians getting massacred by killing these 8 guys who'd been murderers themselves. And I love that between the Yard and the Vigilance Committee, the case itself was solved. There's only one person who can pull off that sleight of hand. And I love the representation of Moriarty, like as a maestro, as a conductor, amidst all the flames, and that's how Sherlock sees him. It's so good. But he's almost playing Robin Hood. And Sherlock gets mad at that because he's like, no, he's like, that's not how it's done. He's like, there's consequences. Oh, I love it. What exactly are you thinking, Lord of Crime? Yeah. And Sherlock, it's puzzling to Sherlock because he's like, why are you doing this? What's the point? And he can't figure it out yet. It's bamboozling him. And then William looks so pleased as punch with Sherlock's decision. He's like, oh, so that's what you did. Funny that. Ha ha ha. Like, he just looks so pleased, which means that the administrators at the Yard will not be content to allow Jack to remain at large like this. The next move they'll consider, and then, yep, Atherton is mad. And the green, I love the contrast of the green. We just pan out, instead of the reds, it's the green with Atherton. And of course, he's mad because Jack the Ripper's still at large. The Scotland Yard didn't get rid of him. And then, yeah. And then that shot of Patterson. Or Paterson. I'm sure one of you will correct me. So, the question is, in all of this, going forward, I feel like Sherlock is going to want to reach out to Moriarty to ask him why he's doing this and what the whole deal is. Because that's the only way Sherlock's going to be able to solve the case. And meanwhile, I think Atherton's going to crack down and get harder with all of this. And so things are just getting it's like the rubber band's getting wound tighter and tighter and tighter. But the problem is that Moriarty, they think that they got rid of Jack the Ripper's group. They think that they got rid of all of them, right? They don't realize, I don't think, that there's this Milverton guy working behind the scenes pulling the strings. They don't realize there's another guy still on the loose that's doing research on Moriarty as we speak. So that's exciting. So yeah. I'm so curious now with this new third party getting introduced, what we're going to be doing with that. So, obviously don't spoil me, but I'm really excited to see what happens next. So yeah, I'm also curious to know your thoughts down below. I mean, Moran, this animation in this episode was, I love the animation, the shot of Moran when he gets all excited with Bond, the elbow thing, Sherlock, the red lights with Lewis and William's face and their eyes, the Milverton, everything. It's so intriguing. And now I'm excited to know where we're going to go to from here. Because technically, we're at episode 5 of the second core. So we're about halfway through. So I'm curious. To see what we do next for the halfway point. I can't believe we're already halfway through the second season. But here we are. So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope you all enjoyed this reaction. I'm curious to see what's going to happen next. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 17 of Moriarty the Patriot.